Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, berdiri pada 23 Desember 1957. Akuntan muda tanah air mengambil prakarsa pendirian IAI, dipimpin oleh Profesor Sumarjo Citro Sidoyo. IAI didirikan untuk membimbing dan mempertinggi mutu pendidikan akuntansi dan mempertinggi mutu pekerjaan akuntan. Sejak itu, IAI berkembang menjadi organisasi profesi akuntan yang turut mewarnai sejarah perekonomian Indonesia. Inisiasi penting selanjutnya adalah ketika IAI mengambil tanggung jawab menjadi standar setter untuk mendukung pasar modal dan dunia investasi Indonesia. IAI menerbitkan prinsip akuntansi Indonesia (PAI) dan norma pemeriksaan akuntan NPA. PAI nantinya berkembang menjadi standar akuntansi keuangan (SAK). IAI terus tumbuh menjadi pengawal transparansi dan akuntabilitas perekonomian Indonesia. Dalam dinamika global, IAI menjadi pendiri dan anggota IFRS, pendiri dan anggota ASEAN Federation of Accountants (AFA), serta Associate Member Chartered Accountant Worldwide (CAW). Di masa kini, tidak bisa dibantahkan, IAI berperan di hampir semua sektor perekonomian. DPN periode 2022-2026 akan meneruskan estafet kepemimpinan profesi menuju IAI bersatu bersama menciptakan peluang meraih kesuksesan. Melalui rencana strategis IAI periode 2022-2026, IAI tumbuh, kuat, dan berkelanjutan. Rencana strategis IAI terdiri dari 4 pilar. Pilar 1, memperkuat transformasi profesi akuntansi melalui peningkatan kuantitas dan kualitas akuntan Indonesia yang memiliki kompetensi, kredibilitas, serta mematuhi regulasi, kode etik, dan standar profesi. Pilar 2, meningkatkan kepercayaan publik kepada profesi akuntansi sebagai pemimpin dalam pengembangan ekosistem keuangan dan keberlanjutan. Pilar 3, memperkuat perlindungan hukum dan praktik keprofesian akuntan di berbagai sektor di era keberlanjutan. Pilar 4, meningkatkan tata kelola organisasi IAI dan memperluas kerjasama dengan pemangku kepentingan profesi akuntansi. IAI siap mengawal perekonomian Indonesia menuju Sustainable Development Goals. IAI tumbuh, kuat, dan berkelanjutan.
Selamat datang di aplikasi IAI Lounge. Melalui aplikasi ini, Anda dapat mendaftarkan diri Anda untuk mengikuti berbagai kegiatan training, membaca SAK online, dan juga memonitor kegiatan PPL yang pernah Anda ikuti. Download aplikasi IAI Lounge di App Store atau Google Play Store. Untuk anggota IAI, silakan login menggunakan email @akuntanindonesia. Sedangkan untuk non-anggota, login menggunakan alamat email yang telah Anda daftarkan sebelumnya. Pada halaman home, terdapat berbagai menu untuk dapat dinikmati. Cek section Lounge untuk melihat event IAI, SAK online, CAW Network, dan Affiliated Campus. Untuk cek jadwal pelatihan dan event terkini, klik menu event. Scroll untuk melihat berbagai kegiatan dan event yang dilaksanakan oleh IAI, seperti seminar, pelatihan, serta workshop. Apabila Anda telah melakukan proses pendaftaran dan telah menyelesaikan proses administrasi, silakan cek list event yang akan Anda ikuti pada menu My Event. Selanjutnya, Anda dapat membaca SAK secara online. Klik menu SAK online untuk langsung terhubung dengan aplikasi SAK online. Gratis untuk anggota IAI. Untuk non-anggota, silakan mendaftar untuk berlangganan. Pada menu Home, terdapat juga section keanggotaan untuk mencari informasi terkini tentang keanggotaan IAI dan ASEAN CPA. Nikmati kemudahan mengakses data akuntan profesional pemegang CA, ASEAN CPA, dan akuntan berpraktik. Selanjutnya, pada section KJA, terdapat menu Find KJA untuk mencari kantor jasa akuntan terdekat di sekitar Anda. Terdapat juga menu materi KJA untuk memperkaya pengetahuan dan kompetensi Anda. Section KJA akan memudahkan Anda untuk mendapatkan informasi lengkap dan terkini seputar kantor jasa akuntan. Terakhir, tepatnya di bagian bawah, terdapat menu berita dan publikasi yang akan mengupdate Anda dengan informasi terkini terkait perkembangan profesi akuntansi baik nasional maupun internasional, dan pastinya mengenai SAK Update. Selamat menikmati aplikasi IAI Lounge, available on App Store and Google Play Store. Journey to be a professional accountant is just one click away.
What kind of tomorrow do you want to shape? A connected world, working together to prosper and thrive. Training as a chartered accountant puts you in a position to make a real difference, giving you the skills and perspectives to build the tomorrow you want. Become a difference maker. Become a chartered accountant.
Gabung Brevet Pajak IAI, pilihan tepat untuk Anda. Pelatihan Brevet IAI, ahli pajak, bedah substansi, temukan solusi. Kenapa memilih IAI? Modul yang selalu update dan materi yang dilengkapi dengan pembahasan studi kasus komprehensif. Instruktur yang terjaga kompetensinya, berpengalaman dan tentu saja profesional. Apa aja yang didapat kalau belajar pajak? Sudah pasti, kita jadi tahu seluk-beluk perhitungan pajak. Menjadi kuasa hukum perpajakan mewakili perusahaan, meningkatkan karir dan menunjang profesi. Kalau ingin menjadi konsultan pajak, belajar brevet pajak juga bisa sebagai langkah persiapan USKP. So, banyak kan manfaat belajar brevet pajak? Sebagai benefit tambahan, IAI melaksanakan program kuliah umum perpajakan dengan menghadirkan narasumber dari praktisi dan profesional di bidang perpajakan. IAI juga melaksanakan gathering alumni brevet untuk senantiasa mengupdate informasi perpajakan. Kalian juga tidak perlu bingung, karena IAI menyiapkan berbagai pilihan waktu belajar, jadi dapat disesuaikan dengan kebutuhan. Bagi teman-teman mahasiswa, IAI juga memberikan harga khusus mahasiswa aktif. Selama pandemi, IAI juga tetap hadir dalam pelatihan brevet pajak secara virtual dengan menggunakan platform Microsoft Teams. Hal ini juga memungkinkan untuk dapat diikuti oleh peserta dari seluruh Indonesia. Dan untuk diketahui, pelatihan brevet pajak terapan IAI juga diperkuat dengan MOU antara IAI dan Direktorat Jenderal Pajak. IAI juga memiliki kompartemen akuntan perpajakan, yang salah satu kegiatan rutinnya adalah menyelenggarakan regular tax discussion yang mengupas isu perpajakan terkini. Pelatihan brevet IAI hadir di 6 knowledge center di Jabodetabek, IAI Knowledge Center Menteng, Moy, Serpong, Kedoya, Fatmawati, dan Sumarekon Bekasi. Selain itu, dengan standarisasi nasional, pelatihan brevet IAI juga hadir di beberapa IAI wilayah di Indonesia. Nah, jadi tunggu apa lagi? Ayo segera daftar pelatihan brevet pajak terapan IAI. Pelatihan brevet IAI, ahli pajak, bedah substansi, temukan solusi.
Selamat datang di aplikasi IAI Lounge. Melalui aplikasi ini, Anda dapat mendaftarkan diri Anda untuk mengikuti berbagai kegiatan training, membaca SAK online, dan juga memonitor kegiatan PPL yang pernah Anda ikuti. Download aplikasi IAI Lounge di App Store atau Google Play Store. Untuk anggota IAI, silakan login menggunakan email @akuntanindonesia. Sedangkan untuk non-anggota, login menggunakan alamat email yang telah Anda daftarkan sebelumnya. Pada halaman home, terdapat berbagai menu untuk dapat dinikmati. Cek section lounge untuk melihat event IAI, SAK online, CAW Network, dan affiliated campus. Untuk cek jadwal pelatihan dan event terkini, klik menu event. Scroll untuk melihat berbagai kegiatan dan event yang dilaksanakan oleh IAI, seperti seminar, pelatihan, serta workshop. Apabila Anda telah melakukan proses pendaftaran dan telah menyelesaikan proses administrasi, silakan cek list event yang akan Anda ikuti pada menu My Event. Selanjutnya, Anda dapat membaca SAK secara online. Klik menu SAK online untuk langsung terhubung dengan aplikasi SAK online. Gratis untuk anggota IAI. Untuk non-anggota, silakan mendaftar untuk berlangganan. Pada menu Home, terdapat juga section keanggotaan untuk mencari informasi terkini tentang keanggotaan.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat. Our program will begin
Kemudahan
shortly.
mengakses data akuntan profesional pemegang CA, ASEAN CPA, dan akuntan berpraktik.
To preserve an order of this event, please
Pada
place
section
your cell
agenda,
phone and all
dapat
other electronic
menemukan
device in silent mode. Thank you.
Mencari kantor jasa akuntan terdekat di sekitar Anda. Terdapat juga menu materi KJA.
The Honorable Chief Connectivity and Integrated Reporting Officer, IFRS Foundation, Mr. Jonathan Labrie, II National Council Member and Chair of II Task Force Comprehensive Corporate Reporting, Ibu Rosita Oli Sinaga, Speaker and Moderator of Info Session, members of II Supervisory Board and member of II National Council who's present offline here in Geraha Akuntan and also online via Zoom, II Executive Director, representative from Finance Profession Supervisory Center, Ministry of Finance from Bank Indonesia, and member of II Task Force Comprehensive Corporate Reporting. All II member, participant, ladies and gentlemen. From Geraha Akuntan Jakarta, good afternoon and welcome to IFRS II Foundation Joint Info Session, Setting the Landscape for IFRS S1 and S2, Path for Adoption and Implementation. My name is Faiza. It's a great honor for me to be your host for today. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start our event today, we would like to invite you all to rise and sing the national anthem, Indonesia Raya, and we'll continue with II Mars. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, all distinguished guests, to open our event today, let us hear the opening remarks from II President Bapak Ardan Adi Perdana, who delivered through video recording.
Honorable Ibu Sofia Watimena, Commissioner of OJK and member of EIE Supervisory Board, Mr. Jonathan Labrie, Chief Connectivity and Integrated Reporting Officer, IFRS Foundation, Ibu Rosita Urisinaga, Council Member of EIE, members of EIE Supervisory Board, member of EIE National Council, Bapak Lukas Kurniawan, President Director of Austindo Nusantara Jaya, Bapak Irwan Lau, member of Indonesian Accounting Standard Board, colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is truly an honor for me to welcome you to today's info session, setting the landscape for IFRS S1 and S2, path to adoption and implementation. On behalf of Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, IAI, I would like to thank you for your commitment to participate in today's learning and sharing opportunity as we embark on our sustainability journey. I would like to express our appreciation to the IFRS Foundation, especially our guest today, Mr. Jonathan Labrie, for the opportunity to collaborate and discuss this very important topic. Our appreciation also to Jonathan for his contribution to our 26th National Accounting Symposium in Ternate in September. EIE is fully committed in our effort to continue raising awareness and facilitating conversation about sustainability reporting and its assurance. Ladies and gentlemen, as part of the global accountancy profession ecosystem, EIE recognizes the growing demand from our stakeholders for enhanced focus on sustainability, particularly on how this will impact the future of our profession. The Indonesian government too have stepped up their efforts in decarbonizing our economy. The expectation is for the profession to play a bigger role in contributing the creation of an economic ecosystem that promoted sustainable and accountable growth. For EIE, today marks another important milestone in our sustainability agenda in Indonesia. As a member of IFRS, one of our key priorities is to support adoption and implementation of international standards. The latest development in sustainability disclosures and their assurance are without doubt major priority for EIE. Following the establishment of our task force comprehensive corporate reporting in 2020, EIE is now working on establishing the Sustainability Standard Board to continue our work on sustainability reporting standards. This is an embodiment of our strategic plan, the next for success. We also call for development of sustainability reporting standards in Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, as highlighted in many studies, including those looking into the state of sustainability reporting in Asia Pacific, there is a growing importance for a global baseline for sustainability reporting standards. Many believe this will help resolving the alphabet soup challenge. I hope that our discussion today can highlight some of the key challenges that we need to resolve to ensure that the successful adoption and implementation of the sustainability disclosure standards in Indonesia. As a recognized professional accounting organization in Indonesia, EIE recognizes the importance of continuing our effort to advocate for sustainability, working closer with our partners and stakeholders to build awareness and contribute to global standard setting and building the capacity of our Indonesian accountants to ensure that we will have the right skill set and expertise to support adoption and implementation of the standard. There are important steps that we need to consider as we move from standard setting to implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude with a call to action to our Indonesian accountants and stakeholders. There can never be more appropriate time for accountant to act on our responsibility and make a real difference. This is our calling, and one that we must take as part of our responsibility in protecting in public interest. The accountancy profession has an important role to play in creating transparent, accountable, and unfragmented sustainability reporting and ensure an ecosystem that can deliver real value for our stakeholders. Thank you once again, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of today's session. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we would like to kindly invite for a photo session all speakers and moderators, accompanied by IAI National Council member Bapak Denny Purhadianto, Bapak Maliki Heru Santosa, and IAI Executive Director Ibu. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen and distinguished guests, the International Sustainability Standard Board, or ISSB, has launched the IFRS S1 and IFRS S2 on June 2023. It has been an important milestone for accounting profession in sustainability. Sustainability disclosure has evolved from a merry corporate responsibility practice to a vital strategy for organization seeking to thrive in an increasingly conscious and competitive business landscape. In this discussion, we will hear from IFRS Foundation, II, and preparers, sharing the understanding of the landscape to support adoption of the SSB Sustainability Disclosure Standard. Before we start the session, we would like to inform you that participants who join us offline and online will be entitled to get an e-certificate. You are required to join our survey. The link will be provided at the end of the session. And now allow me to inform you the Zoom meeting protocol for participant online. Participant microphone is mute, participant video person is on. The event will be recorded and II will broadcast on II social media. Use chat function to leave a question and discuss with other participants. Use raise hand function to ask a question directly. Material and recording can be accessible on our website, or our communication media will be informed later or according to profession. Ladies and gentlemen, let us start our session today. The session will be delivered by our speaker, Mr. Jonathan Labrie, Chief Connectivity and Integrated Reporting Officer, IFRS Foundation. Joining us on panel discussion, Ibu Rosita Ulisinaga, Bapak Lukas Kurniawan, President Director of Austindo Nusantara Jaya Tbk. The session will be led by Bapak Irwan Lau, member of the Indonesian Financial Accounting Standard Board or the SAK-IAI. Allow me to inform you a brief CV of Bapak Irwan Lau. Irwan Lau is a member of Indonesian Financial Accounting Standard Board or the SAK-IAI. He is a partner in the Capital Market and Accounting Advisory Services Group of PwC Jakarta. Irwan has more than 16 years of experience working with clients in Canada, Australia, and Indonesia through the financial reporting application of various complex transactions. Upon graduating from the Trinity Western University in Canada, he has complete professional accounting certification. Irwan is a proud CA Indonesia. And now we allow Pak Irwan to host the session.
Thanks a lot. So I'm truly a proud Indonesian accountant, right? So ladies and gentlemen and fellow accountants, wherever you are joining us online, please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists. We have three very esteemed and remarkable panelists. It is my great pleasure to introduce who they are. It'll probably take me the full session to read just their CV. So pardon me if I skip some parts of your CVs, but a truly distinctive guest that we have, right? So the first one is Jonathan Labrie. Jonathan is the Chief Connectivity and Integrated Reporting Officer of the IFRS Foundation. Jonathan has more than 17 years of experience in public policy, corporate governance, and regulations, discussions, and standard setting in the accountancy and corporate reporting world. Prior to this position, I believe, or you're also involved with the Integrated Reporting Council, as well as the Value Foundation Reporting Foundation, right? And Jonathan will also led the Public Policy Affairs team at the Institute of Chartered Accountants England and Wales. So truly someone who has done a lot in this accounting field, and we are honored to have you here to talk about IFRS S1 and S2. The lady in the middle here is Ibu Rosita Sinaga. I probably don't need much introduction for Ibu Rosita because most accountants throughout Indonesia know who she is. But I will just say a few words, Ibu Rosita. She is currently a reminder, perhaps. She's still currently our member of the DPN IAI, council member of our IAI. She was the chairperson of the Indonesian Accounting Standards Board for 8 years, I believe. And she's also still actively practicing accountancy in her firm, which is one of the global accounting firms. And with me today is also Pak Lukas Kurniawan. Pak Lukas Kurniawan is currently the President Director of PT Austindo, which is the agribusiness company publicly listed in Indonesia. My understanding is probably Austindo is not necessarily the largest agribusiness company, but in my humble opinion, is probably the most committed to sustainable practice. Right? So that's why we are very happy to have him as one of our guest speakers. And a very fun fact, but Lukas Kurniawan was an audit partner in two of the large accounting firms. So he clearly made a successful transition, being in accounting and now a president director in a publicly listed company. So it's truly an inspiring story for all of us. So thank you for Pak Lucas. Without further ado, I think I will give the floor to Jonathan, who will walk us through, give us an overview of what IFRS S1 and S2 do, and the importance in the corporate reporting world.
Thank you very much, and it's a huge pleasure to be here. A huge pleasure to be in Jakarta in person and among friends who I have seen on screen for the last 3 or 4 years, but haven't had the opportunity of meeting or engaging with personally. So it really is a great pleasure for me to be in Indonesia, in Jakarta this week. It's actually part of a new role that I've been asked to take on by the ISSB. My main role at the IFRS Foundation is to be the Connectivity and Integrated Reporting Officer, which means looking after and stewarding the integrated reporting framework and integrated thinking principles. But the ISSB has asked me to take on a jurisdictional role within Indonesia and a couple of other Southeast Asian economies to help support the path to adoption of IFRS S1 and S2, which are the inaugural ISSB sustainability disclosure standards, as we know. So my role, in addition to sharing with you some insights this afternoon, is as much as anything to engage with IAI and other stakeholders in Indonesia, but really to hear from you what some of your perceptions are about the standards, what some of the challenges and opportunities are, what the road to adoption might be, and also if there are any questions in terms of guidance that you or other resources that you feel should be available to the Indonesian market that we can provide at the ISSB and the IFRS Foundation. So it's a great pleasure to take on this role, to engage with all of you and to hear and listen to your perspectives on where we are, what the roadmap is to adoption in Indonesia, and also any questions or concerns or comments that you have that I can take back and make sure are properly reflected in our overall strategy and plan. What I would say just at the beginning before walking through the two standards is first of all that really we have been through a time of enormous change in the corporate reporting landscape. The IFRS Foundation consulted the market in just 2020, that's just 3 years ago, on whether the IFRS Foundation should establish a role in the whole area of sustainability disclosure standards for the capital markets. And following an emphatic response from the market, it established at COP26, the climate talks at the end of 2021, it announced that the ISSB would be launched. But not only that, but that it would be leading a consolidation in the corporate reporting landscape. For too long, we had what was known at the time as the alphabet soup of different disclosure standards initiatives, different frameworks and standards. And the ISSB, the IFRS Foundation, in determining that it should play its role in the sustainability disclosure landscape, decided that it should also lead a consolidation of that landscape and reduce the number of organizations that were developing those standards and frameworks, and actually start using them within the inaugural ISSB standards. So the Value Reporting Foundation that I worked for moved into the IFRS Foundation, as did the CDSB, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board. And so those two organizations were taken out of the system and have really provided a running start to supporting the ISSB in establishing these first two standards. Because what the Value Reporting Foundation and CDSB brought were decades worth of expertise, investment from the market all around the world, but also the IP, the standards themselves, which have been used to inform the inaugural S1 and S2 standards. Because from the beginning, the ISSB was clear that it didn't want to reinvent the wheel. It didn't want to create a whole new set of unrecognizable disclosure standards, but rather build on established practice, build on established standards, and build on established concepts and principles, including from its sister board, the IASB, so that what was produced would be recognizable and straightforward to both endorse and then adopt within national practice. And what a year 2023 has been, because we have released the first set of standards in June, and a month later, the IOSCO, the global securities regulators, announced that they would endorse S1 and S2, and they issued a call to arms to regulators nationally, their members, to actually endorse S1 and S2 and look to implement those standards as well. And then just a month after that, the Financial Stability Board announced that because IFRS S2 embeds the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures within that climate standard, that they would be closing down their TCFD secretariat and would be asking the ISSB to monitor TCFD adoption from now on behalf of the Financial Stability Board. So we've been taking on new responsibilities from a monitoring role as well as a standard setting role. We also recognize that our job does not stop with standard setting, with issuing these standards. We know that markets around the world require materials, education materials, resources, engagement like this to explain and inform and listen, most importantly, to what is happening in the markets and make sure that that is fed back into the way we think about how our standards are being implemented, and take account and take note of the issues that are raised in jurisdictions. We now have a transitional implementation group that is made up of market participants from around the world that will be hearing very specifically from markets the challenges with adopting the standards, to determine A, whether clarifications are required, B, whether we need to go back to the board to redeliberate on a particular aspect of the standard, maybe something that we haven't thought about that has come up through the consideration in a particular market, or perhaps educational materials that need to be developed for the market, taking into account that feedback. So we recognize that there is a work of capacity building, of engagement, and of education that is our continuous commitment to this market, as it is to other markets around the world, to continue this dialogue, to do that whenever we can. I think, known to several of you, that I will engage in webinars at all times of the day or night, and meetings, and I am very dedicated to the role that I've been asked to take on. So please do consider me to be your contact person at the ISSB. If I cannot answer the question, then I'll find somebody who can, but I'm very committed to going on this journey with all of you as market participants, as regulators, and as accountants. So I'm now very quickly going to walk through IFRS S1 and S2. I have under kind of 20 minutes, 25 minutes, so this is not going to be a comprehensive session, but I am very happy to have the slides. I think they have been shared with you. If they haven't, then I'm very happy for the slides to be shared. And I'm very happy to speak to any of you individually, either today or at a future time, to walk through and answer any questions of detail that you might have based on the presentation. But for now, I'd like to begin with a description of S1, which is our foundational document, IFRS S1. And this standard sets out the general requirements for a company to disclose information about its sustainability-related financial risks and opportunity that's necessary for investors in making decisions related to providing resources to the company. So I think many stakeholders are familiar with sustainability reporting, sustainability disclosures, but perhaps they are in the form of sustainability impact disclosures. They're really reporting on what the impact of a company is on the external environment, on society. What the ISSB's standards seek to do is take that external impact, take that, the impact of the business, but turn it around and internalize that and say, well, what is the effect of that information on the business model of your company, on its strategy, on its performance, on its prospects, and how does the board and top management of the company use that information and those insights to inform the conversation that it has with its investors? Because what we believe is that better information will lead to better investment decisions. And we have over, I think it's over $100 trillion of capital in our global equity markets. If we are going to finance the change that all of our governments have committed to, then it cannot just be governments that finance that change. We have to see behavioral change in our capital markets. And we know that information, that standard setting can influence behavior and that can influence those outcomes. So we need our capital markets to be activated. We need to unlock the potential investment in sustainable business models to enable those commitments to be fulfilled. We cannot rely just on governments and on regulators. The capital markets, business and investors have to step in partnership, consistent with SDG 17, in partnership in order to facilitate the transition that we know is needed and that we know investors are increasingly demanded, because climate risk and other sustainability risks are a risk to business models and a risk to investment, as we all know. And S1 applies the architecture of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, those recommendations, whenever providing information about sustainability, which is an approach I know is already used by several companies, many companies in Southeast Asia and around the world. And so we really do see the TCFD and those recommendations as being the bedrock, both of S1 and S2. And to help companies identify sustainability risks and opportunities and disclosures for matters other than climate, which is covered by IFRS S2 that I'll talk about in a second, S1 refers to other sources of information to help companies. So for example, the SASB standards, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, are standards that can be used in order to adopt S1. This means companies have a toolkit, not just the standards themselves, but a toolkit to disclose material information about all of their sustainability-related risks and opportunities from day one. Because while the topic-specific standard in S2 is a climate standard, the ISSB has been very clear that it is climate first, but not climate only. And whilst we develop a book of standards, S1 should be used in order to communicate the standards on sustainability, the information on sustainability other than climate. So what about the contents of the IFRS S1? Well, this slide sets out the contents of S1, and I'm not going to go through, obviously, the detail about this, but some of these aspects will come out in the presentation. But what we have here are 6 sections that S1 is divided into: the overall objective of the standard, the scope of the standard, and the ISSB standards at large, the conceptual foundations of sustainability-related financial information, which includes the requirements on materiality and connected information, which again, I will come back to, the core content disclosure requirements relating to governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets, the 4 pillars of TCFD, general requirements, including the location of disclosures, the timing of reporting, and a statement of compliance, and the requirements relating to judgments, uncertainties, and errors. Now, as I said, IS1 sets out the overarching requirements for a company to disclose information about its sustainability-related risks and opportunities to information for investors. And here we mean those risks and opportunities that investors would be interested in. We don't mean every possible risk and opportunity that a company could be affected by. And S1 describes this objective by referring to risks and opportunities that could reasonably be expected to affect a company's prospects. That is, its cash flows, access to finance, or cost of capital over the short, medium, or long term. Companies identify which information to disclose to investors using, as we know, the concept of materiality. Now, here's another important way where there is this connectivity between the IASB and the ISSB, because we use the same definition of materiality in the ISSB as is used by the IASB. In other words, the same materiality definition that's applied to the financial statement. So it's the same concept that those applying IFRS accounting standards will be familiar with. To assess if the information is material, a company will need to assess whether, if it was omitted, misstated, or obscured by other information, it could reasonably be expected to influence an investor's decision. Now, why is that important? Because people using different standards ask that question quite often. It's important because we want to make sure that our standards enable companies to communicate the key information to the investor market both efficiently and effectively. And I think it comes back to that point earlier about incentives in the system driving behavior, but also making sure that in the language of the Financial Stability Board, there isn't a market failure caused by the failure today to disclose information that we know has a key risk into the future. Let's not get trapped by short-term disclosure horizons. Let's think about those known long-term risks that we simply haven't been factoring in to our accounting decision-making or our corporate governance thus far. Now, it's important to be clear about why sustainability information is important to investors. And I will try it. Here we go. So a company's prospects are inextricably linked to how it works with and services its stakeholders in the community, how it operates in society, and the natural resources that it draws upon through its value chain. And for some years now, through integrated reporting, we've been discovering these connections and including them in integrated reports in different markets around the world. And this, perhaps, is where the concepts of integrated reporting are most acutely embedded within the new standards, within the new IFRS S1 and S2. And we want to enable a company to explain how it maintains its resources and relationships, how it manages its dependencies on them, and how its impacts on these resources and relationships give rise to sustainability-related risks and opportunities for the company. So we've built on concepts from the integrated reporting framework to describe this link. Now, it's really important for the information to be connected to the financial statements so that investors have a complete and consistent and holistic understanding of a company. And the ISSB has made significant progress in facilitating the connections between sustainability-related financial disclosures and financial statements by including concepts from IFRS accounting standards and the integrated reporting framework in S1 requirements for connected information in S1 and S2, including between sustainability-related risks and opportunities and disclosures on core content. Now, as I mentioned, companies that use the TCFD recommendations will already be providing information about their core content areas, which are illustrated on this slide. S1 requires a company to disclose information about its governance, strategy, risk management, as well as its metrics and targets in relation to its sustainability-related risks and opportunities. And these four content areas reflect how companies manage those risks and opportunities. Now, as I briefly mentioned earlier, S1 points to other sources of guidance to help companies to identify which risks and opportunities to report on and which information to disclose. S2 sets out requirements for climate-related disclosures when that is identified as a topic that information needs to be provided about. For topics beyond climate, S1 sets out how to think about this. First, when identifying what sustainability risks and opportunities to report on, S1 says that consideration must be given to the SASB standards. Look there first for information that meets the needs of investors. Now, this sounds like quite a strong requirement, but this provision is here to help companies. This is about the identification of material sustainability matters. And for those of you who are not familiar with the SASB standards provide industry-specific information. So it breaks down the capital market into 66 different industry sectors because investors tell us that they need a level of specificity, a level of precision to understand how particular sustainability topics affect an industry so that they can compare the disclosures from one company in one industry sector to a different company in the same industry, but perhaps in a different market. So for comparability purposes, they need that level of precision. What these identifiers effectively help companies to do is identify the material sustainability factors that are relevant to their to their industry. So it really is a helpful resource for companies to help them really understand what are the material sustainability factors that will help their particular industry. So in addition to that, companies may consider other materials, specifically the CDSB framework, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board framework, industry practice, and other materials that are related to investor-focused standards. And then after the company has identified the topic to provide information about S1, it tells companies how to identify the particular disclosures to provide. So here S1 again says that an entity must consider the SASB standards. In addition, companies may consider, to the extent that it meets investors' information needs, the CDSB framework, industry practice, and other investor-focused standards. And in this case, also the GRI standards and the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, to the extent that they meet investors' information needs. So we're not seeking to duplicate, we're seeking to provide a different lens so that investors can get access to the same level of information they need in order to make good decisions on the information that companies provide to them. So in summary, there are instructions within S1 from day one to facilitate the reporting on all important sustainability risks and opportunities that a company's investors need to understand. Now, we know that applying ISSB standards will be a big change for many. And to help companies get ready to report using S1 and S2, the ISSB provides reliefs for the first year of application. Now, this was a key matter for deliberation and decision by the ISSB board members when considering the responses, the 1,400 responses that we received to the draft standards S1 and S2 last year, was that companies felt that they needed time to adjust to the standards. And we were very clear, the ISSB, that we were not seeking to impose high cost and high burden on companies. We wanted to work with companies to facilitate the change in a way that was helpful to business and gave them sufficient time to respond to the introduction of S1 and S2. So there are 5 reliefs that are provided in the first year of application. Firstly, companies can limit disclosure to climate-related risks and opportunities and begin reporting on their other sustainability-related risks and opportunities in the second year that they apply IFRS S1 and S2. Whereas ultimately the sustainability information needs to be provided at the same time as the financial statements, in the first year, companies can provide annual sustainability-related disclosures with the next half-year reporting rather than at the same time as the financial statements. And then there are other reliefs to assist companies in the first year so that companies do not need to provide disclosures about Scope 3 GHG emissions, apply the GHG Protocol corporate standard to measure emissions if they're already using a different measurement approach, provide comparative information. Companies that limit disclosures to climate-related information in the first year also do not need to provide comparative information about their sustainability-related risks and opportunities beyond climate in their second year. So these reliefs are designed to enable companies to have the time to put in place the reporting practices and structures and other resources to provide high-quality, decision-useful information. It also gives us time to engage and work out what education materials, what other guidance and support the markets might need as we work towards the transition for the adoption of S1 and S2. IFRS S1 and S2 are effective for annual reporting periods beginning on or after the 1st of January 2024, and they can be used earlier so long as they're used together and when this is disclosed. So considerations in setting 2024 effective date, well, the primary reason for setting this as the effective date is that the ISSB is responding to the urgent demand of investors for decision-useful, comparable information, and particularly better information about climate. It's worth pausing here to consider that the IFRS Foundation itself is not a standard setter or a regulator. Its authority comes from the due process that it has, which is to engage with the markets around the world, investors, businesses, the accounting profession, and other stakeholders to really determine the outcomes of its consultations, and that is its due process. So we have no regulatory authority. We respond always and are demand-led. We are, if you like, the embodiment of that whole idea of market-led organization. So we listen to the market, and everything that we say is really a response to what we are hearing in the market from investors, from businesses, and for other stakeholders who we consult. S1 and S2 build on well-established standards and frameworks. For example, the TCFD recommendations that I've spoken about, and also the SASB standards, meaning that many companies are already advanced in their disclosures. And even in markets where the market is already adopting GRI, there is a familiarity with sustainability issues and sustainability disclosures and their importance. Transition reliefs available to support companies put in place reporting practices and structures. Companies will comply with disclosure requirements using information that reasonable and supportable and is available without undue cost or effort. And as I said earlier, the ISSB is committed to supporting companies through capacity building initiatives and also through providing guidance. It's also worth mentioning that the ecosystem is responding to the establishment of S1 and S2. So CDP will incorporate S2 climate-related data into its platform for the 2024 disclosure cycle. And many companies, of course, disclose on the CDP platform and will collect data as required for S2 for the 2024 financial year. So that's a critical development for companies that are using the CDP platform. And it speaks to that whole idea of consolidation, of coalescing around a set of principles and concepts that will achieve a global baseline for sustainability disclosure standards for the capital markets, responding to what investors need in order to make better investment decisions. Now, over the next couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about IFRS S2, which is our climate-related standard. IFRS S2 fully incorporates the recommendations of TCFD, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. And we've long recognized the conceptual consistency between integrated reporting and the TCFD recommendations. S2 climate-related disclosures sets out the requirements for a company to disclose information about the climate-related risks and opportunities, building on the requirements that are described in IFRS S1. It requires disclosure of both cross-industry and industry-specific information about climate-related risks and opportunities. And climate-related risks include physical risks, such as those resulting from severe bad weather, and transition risks, such as those associated with policy action and changes in technology that can affect how a company runs its business. Climate-related opportunities refers to the potential positive effects arising from climate change for a company. In applying S2, a company identifies and discloses material information about climate-related risks and opportunities. S1 helps companies work out how to do this. Investors need this information to understand how climate affects a company's performance and prospects, including its transition planning, its ability to adapt, and how climate risks manifest in its value chain. Now, another critical point about S1 and S2 is that S2 is required to be used with S1. This is because S1 sets out the way companies should approach reporting. For example, S1 establishes the key concepts, such as the need for connected information, how to think about the value chain, and provides important guidance on the assessment of materiality to be used when applying S2, which determines which particular disclosures a company needs to apply given its own circumstances. It also sets out the qualitative characteristics for the information that has to be provided. For example, that information that needs to be relevant and represented faithfully. Now, just like S1, S2 requires a company to disclose information about its governance, strategy, and risk management, as well as its metrics and targets, but specifically in relation to its climate-related risks and opportunities. And some of the key requirements in S2 are found within strategy and metrics and targets. So for example, S2 asks that information be provided about climate targets that a company has set, such as its GHG emission targets and how it plans to achieve them. These are strategy and decision-making, including only transition plans a company including any transition plans a company has, current and anticipated effects of climate-related risks and opportunities on a company's financial performance, financial position and cash flows, an assessment of climate resilience, including climate-related scenarios, disclosure of a company's scope 1 to 3 GHG emissions and associated guidance to help with the measurement and disclosure of this, and industry-based metrics that are associated with common business models and activities in a particular issue. Now, I've been trying to move the slides on, so I am a couple behind, I think. There we go. Sorry, my iPad is now talking to me. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Yeah, we're getting there. Oh gosh. Okay. So climate change and the uncertainties with that can affect the resilience of a company's strategy and business model. And so to help a company to disclose information about the implications of climate change for a strategy and business model and its financial and operational capacity to adjust or adapt over the short, medium and long term, S2 requires all companies to use climate-related scenario analysis, again, familiar from the TCFD recommendations, to inform their disclosures about their resilience to climate change. However, S2 does not specify which scenarios a company should use in its analysis, but requires the company to use relevant scenarios and provide information about the scenarios that it's selected, and to provide information about other relevant assumptions it has used in the scenario analysis. Now, my final slide, because I'm going to just say a few words in a second about the role of the accountancy profession before we move to the Q&A and the panel discussion, is just to say that S2 contains guidance to ensure that the requirement to undertake scenario analysis is to support resilience in disclosures and to make sure that this is proportionate. This includes guidance on how a company is required to determine its approach to scenario analysis used to assess its climate resilience. And climate-related scenario analysis encompasses a range of practice, from qualitative scenario narratives to complex statistical modeling, considering that this is the ISSB, and what a company should decide includes to use an approach that is commensurate with the company's circumstances and to use all reasonable and supportable information that is available to the company at the reporting date without due cost or effort. And to determine what approach is commensurate with the company's circumstances, the company is required to consider both its exposure to climate-related risks and opportunities. The greater the exposure, the greater the need for a sophisticated scenario analysis, and also its skills, capabilities, and resources available for the climate-related scenario analysis. Now, what I have done over the last few minutes, I hope, is touched upon some of the key aspects of IFRS S1 and S2, our commitment to producing guidance and resources to the market to help with the implementation of S1 and S2. And also, we have developed additional guidance that companies must use to apply the standard, as well as illustrative guidance and examples to illustrate aspects of the guidance of the standard. And we will be saying more at COP28, the climate talks at the end of November, beginning of December, where we will be producing much more information about the capacity building efforts and materials that we will be producing. Now, I just wanted to say, and it would be remiss of me not to say this while I'm here at the IAI, which is that I think that there are some huge opportunities that the ISSB's work provides for the accountancy profession here in Indonesia, but around the world as well. Because I think what the standards demand is the use of the rigor, discipline, integrity, ethics, and professional skepticism that we know are at the heart of accountancy training and practice. And it's really critical that these qualities are applied to the implementation of sustainability-related financial disclosures. And I was speaking with an important member of your institute over lunch, who said that, who we were talking about what would make the accountancy profession more attractive to the future. And what we're finding in the world is that within accountancy practice now, there is an embracing of the idea of multidisciplinary teams, particularly when it comes to helping companies navigate some of these complex sustainability matters. So not reaching the end of the road with our own knowledge, but drawing on the knowledge and expertise of others, scientists, environmental scientists, people with expertise outside the accounting profession, but using those disciplines, using that accounting training, that rigor, that objectivity, that professional skepticism to apply different specialisms to the world of sustainability accounting. Because it's going to take that rigor, it's going to take this profession to help on that journey, but we cannot do it alone. It's really important to draw on the talents of others to help us apply and implement these standards. And boy, wouldn't that make this profession more attractive to the next generation of accountants, because it provides a whole new set of opportunities to engage in the market, new disciplines, and new ways of engaging with businesses and our society. It's also really important for the profession, and I know that you're doing this, but to engage in the assurance debate that is now very live on providing assurance standards for the ISSB standards to build lasting trust and confidence in the information that gets to our capital markets, so that our capital markets are robust, that international investors can see the companies listed on the Indonesian Stock Exchange as companies that have robust business models, the highest quality disclosures, and they have confidence to invest in them for the long term. These are just some of the opportunities for this great profession. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have been able to provide this short summary of our standards and to engage with IAI today. And I look forward to continuing our friendship to enable Indonesia to reap what I believe are the benefits of adopting IFRS S1 and S2 as part of our collective mission to achieve a globally accepted and comprehensive corporate reporting system. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay. Can you hear me? All right. Okay. Thanks a lot, Jonathan, for that. Thanks a lot, Jonathan, for that very comprehensive, I would say, in the given time that you have to walk us through what IFRS S1 and S2 do, its role in the corporate reporting world, and importantly, at the end, you have that inspiring call for action for us accountants to support the sustainability reporting effort, right? So thanks a lot for that. Very inspiring. Now, we'll open the floor for a Q&A session with our three distinct panelists. So the questions is open for those of you who are in the room, as well as those of you who attend online. Apparently, we have more than 250 participants online. So feel free to ask questions through the chat function, and we'll try to go through the questions to the extent possible, right? Maybe I'll kick things off with first question for you, Jonathan, given your role from the IFRS Foundation to look after this part of the world, I suppose ASEAN, right? On the journey toward adopting S1 and S2 and the path forward, even adoption and beyond. Can you give us an overview for us, the audience in Indonesia? What's the initial reaction from the other territories that you've come across for this standards S1 and S2? I know you mentioned about IOSCO was very receptive, but what's the initial reaction for other countries in this part of the world, to the extent possible, if you can share that, one. And two, what's your hope for Indonesia?
It's varied. The reaction is varied. Every country, every jurisdiction, every market has a different perspective. But I would say that generally there has been great support for this idea of a global baseline. I think the idea of having corporate reporting as a kaleidoscope where everything is kind of up in the air, lots of different colors, lots of different standards and frameworks. I think the markets around the world, their patience has been tested with that kind of kaleidoscope model of corporate reporting. And they now want a jigsaw where they can see all the pieces of the jigsaw and how the pieces of that jigsaw fit together. They're not necessarily looking for one standard or one organization to have the answer to absolutely every problem. But I think they're looking for organizations to work together to provide the solution so that we have one global corporate reporting system. So insofar as the IFRS Foundation has brought these organizations together, consolidated the landscape, created this idea of a global baseline that enables investors to see across markets. You know, we live in a world of global capital markets. With that endorsement from IOSCO, I think there's great support. Where there are challenges, it is not with the idea or indeed with the standards themselves. The challenges come with the implementation. Because however you present it, even in the smallest markets, there will be some layers on which we are building. There are some ways in which these standards will need to fit into existing practice, existing convention, you know, existing legislation, regulation, and so on. And therefore, how you go jurisdiction by jurisdiction to work out in a reasonable time the adoption of these standards, the implementation of these standards, getting the legislative change where required, building the industry expertise, creating the agencies to work together to begin to think about how these standards can be applied in the context of a jurisdiction, I think is really important. The other key learning points that I would just emphasize are, first of all, the ISSB board has really done everything that it can reasonably to respond to the global feedback that was heard during the consultation period. Over 1,400 responses, I forget how many thousands of engagements during that period. It regards the standards as they are and the reliefs that have been introduced that I spelt out really as being satisfying many of the kind of short-term concerns that the markets have. So what we don't want is for markets to be thinking that they can adopt S1 and S2 in a piecemeal fashion, kind of pick and choose. That undermines the whole idea of a global baseline. You know, we want something that is consistent across the world. Yet we also want to have interoperability with standards that might be developed in jurisdictions. So creating that pathway to interoperability is also really important. And then the final piece, which I know we're going to come on to, but I'll just say the words, I won't develop it, is just there's a lot of interest in this whole idea of connectivity. Yeah.
For that, Jonathan, which leads me to Bu Rosita. In particular, in the context of Indonesia, Bu, given your experience with Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia for so long, and then your role as well as a member of the Task Force for Comprehensive Reporting, how do you see the role of Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, Bu, can play to support the sustainability reporting? We know currently out there in Indonesia, there's still alphabet soup of standards that people use, and probably S1 and S2 is not the first one that they come to their mind at the moment. What will you comment on that?
Yeah, I think before I answer that, I think one message that we need to be at the same page first, right? This is going to be successful, not only for Indonesia, but for the whole global, when we can have one global ecosystem which drive the global comprehensive corporate reporting mindset. Meaning, we are not talking about sustainability reporting, we are talking about the alignment between the sustainability reporting and the financial reporting. I think that's the objective. Number two, so how to convince everybody in the ecosystem, not only in Indonesia, but all countries and all regulators globally, that we need to have a certain level of consistency on how to disclose the sustainability reporting and how that could be aligned with financial reporting. Because at the end of the day, if it is not happen, it's going to be very tough for us, Jonathan, to convince our stakeholders in Indonesia why we need to have another set of sustainability reporting, right? This is another cost. This is another investment. What will be the benefit for us, right? So I think from the professional accountant body, I think that's something that we need to drive the change of the mindset. And the IFRS, I mean the task force is actually, we set up the task force to gather all the stakeholders in Indonesia to have that mindset first. Once we have the mindset, it's going to be more easier for us to take moving forward wherever we want to go, right? So the question is there any ecosystem on that? My answer is we are still building that, right, Jonathan? So I think ESSB, IFAC, all IOSCO, everybody needs to take part to build that ecosystem first. So for example, when we talk to Ministry of Finance or when we talk to OJK, right, they will need to have the same language with the regulator under their circumstances. If the association like us sending a message which is totally different with what they heard from IOSCO, for example, for the OJK capital market, it's going to be very tough. Okay, so I think that's my hope to Jonathan on behalf of ESSB, how to make it happen, a global ecosystem to drive this together. I'm very glad that ISSB has already allocated Jonathan to be in charge for at least for Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. I think that's one step to make it happen, ecosystem, right? So now, number two, the question is, what will be the role of the Indonesian Institute of Chartered Accountants in Indonesia? Definitely from the beginning in 2020, we already set up the task force. It's a very, very significant role because when nobody knows about this in Indonesia, Jonathan, we already take the initiative to lead that this is the new era of the sustainability reporting, and this is the one that accountant need to take part. Before, if you ask accountant in Indonesia, nobody knows about sustainability reporting. It is more on the scientists, engineering, right? Accountant, I don't understand that, right? But now, everybody talking about sustainability reporting because, as you mentioned, this is the future role of accountant, right? So definitely this is not an easy journey for accountant because you need to learn about the concept of how scientists measure the carbon, right? Something like that. But at least we have the raw material. First, we understand how to have a governed process, the internal control concept to build a high quality financial reporting. That's our raw material, which maybe other profession like scientists still need to learn. So we need to learn each other, right? I think this is the role of the accountant to keep the mindset of the preparing report. Need to have internal control. You need to have a good data management, something, right? And of course, for the other profession like scientists, we also need to have message that they need to also share with us what is the concept of the measurement about this kind of things, right? So we need to talk to each other. Therefore, the ecosystem is very important. But for Indonesian Institute of Accountants, I think we are committed to drive this and to be like the one that can gather all the stakeholders to go to that direction. But maybe that's the first comment from me.
Thank you, Bu Rosita. But can I ask you then, follow-up question, given your experience with the task force, and you mentioned the task force consists of wide range of stakeholders, are you optimistic for Indonesia?
I think if you compare to where I began in the IFRS convergence, I think definitely we start in 2008, right? It is a very challenging journey. Even to convince why we need to comply with IFRS is very, very tough. Now, if I talk about, we have ISSB, I think there are more acceptance than 10 years ago. So I think, yes, this is going to be very challenging. But we learned from our mistake before. What we need to do is, Jonathan, to convince that there is a value on this, not only compliance. So what is the value when I try to build a good quality sustainability reporting? What will be the benefit for the company, right? This is very important. When there is evidence that a company who prepares just compliance, not good quality, but the capital market can still buy that, I think we are going back, set up to the 2-3 years ago. So I think this is something that we need to have in our mind. What will be the value to prepare the sustainability reporting? I think to drive the initiative of the climate change, right? Because every company now need to identify what will be the risk and what will be the opportunity, not only the risk. When they know the risk, then they can have a mitigation plan and even can think how to use that the risk to convert to the opportunity. So I give you one example, yeah. For example, like Hyundai. Can you see Hyundai now in all the street with the Ioniq 5, yeah? Look at Wuling, right? Maybe if we are talking about 5 years ago, Hyundai is, what, Hyundai? I've never heard Hyundai, maybe, or even Wuling, right? They can use the risk and convert that to be opportunity. So we can sell that idea to the company. This is not compliance. This is a value add for you. If you really think about how to identify the risk and convert that to opportunity, maybe you can 1-2 steps ahead compared to your other company. I think that's the message, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Bu Rosita. Full disclosure, we're not sponsored by Hyundai, but that is a very good example. Yeah, but this is a very good example. I like it. Which, Bu Rosita gives me a perfect segue to ask Lucas from a preparer's perspective, because what Bu Rosita mentioned there was it's important to understand and to talk about value creation instead of simply compliance exercise, right? And I want to ask about Lucas because he is now in industry building the business. So from your perspective, Pak Lucas, and feel free to elaborate what the company do to give us a background. Do you see this as an opportunity to communicate about values from your perspective as business leaders in the industry? Or unfortunately, we still fall back to that pitfall of simply compliance, right?
Well, it's talking about the value creation from the corporate perspective. Let me take a few moments to share about the ANJ journey. It is really a journey because when we started several years ago, back into at least in 2012, ANJ is agribusiness-based food company. And then we operate from Sumatra. Our operation span to Papua, and we started in 2012. At that time, by constructing a biogas power plant in Belitung Island. And when we started, back then there was no such a hype regarding like a carbon trading. We were promised with the business model that we could sell. I forgot what's the terminology at that time. I think it was FCC, but then the market suddenly disappeared. But we believe that this is still a good value creation, especially we capture the methane gas, and then it is good. It is good for the environment, because methane gas is harmful for the atmosphere. And we convert the methane gas into electricity. We sell to the national grid, to PLN, which can benefit for the people surrounding us. And then we also continue in, before that, we set aside the conservation area for orangutan. At that time, when we develop our plantation, theoretically, and legally we could just open the area for the oil palm plantation. But then when we identified that there is orangutan conservation, we set aside the area 3,000, more than 3,000 hectare, which is a very big conservation at that time, not currently. Probably nowadays it's relatively quite medium size. And then when we continue our journey to the development in Papua, now we have 92,000 hectares, but we only planted approximately 9,000 hectares. And we have committed to conserve the remaining area. So the remaining area, after the deduction of the infrastructure, it is approximately 75,000 hectares for conservation, which is a very huge conservation, approximately the size of Singapore. So, well, what's the value creation? What we have done in the past, with before this communication regarding the sustainability reporting, we did it haphazardly, and then we could not communicate to our stakeholders, especially the investors and the other stakeholders that is quite important for us is the financial institution, the lenders. But throughout this process, throughout this journey, especially since 2020, we started communicating this to our important stakeholders, and then we see the benefits. The immediate benefits is financial benefits, reduction in the interest rate through the sustainability linked loan. Yeah, that's number one. Number two, through creation of this strategy, holistic strategy, and then integrate our sustainability strategy into our business strategy, we also could identify the value. Number one, for example, through our composting program, which is because we implement a zero waste economy. So all the waste in our palm oil mill process, which namely including empty fruit bunch, palm oil mill effluent, with the liquid waste from the palm oil mill effluent. So we process this into organic fertilizer, which could help us to reduce our dependency to inorganic fertilizer. And then we started this journey in 2014. Back then in 2014, nobody cared about converting the palm oil mill waste into organic fertilizer, because at that time the price of the inorganic fertilizer was cheaper than organic. The cost to convert into the organic fertilizer. But because of the war, not that I thank to the war in between Russia and Ukraine, but because of this global crisis that impacts to the global supply chains, our dependency to the organic to non-organic fertilizer could be reduced, and then we can also save some saving because of this reduction of the dependency on the non-organic fertilizers. And the other part is that on the we have a ESG ambition, including the engagement with the smallholders. Why it is important for us? This sustainability is part of the sustainability, which included in the S1, is one of the stakeholder that is quite important is community. And then through this community buildings, our dependency on the smallholders is about 40%. And then through this building this sustainability targets, and then which we also have reported in our sustainability reporting, we could also communicate to our important stakeholders regarding our impact, positive impact to the community. So I think it may not be applicable to all industry, certainly, but I think what is important that I can share from our journey, try to identify what's the most important aspects or factors that from the sustainability perspective that is relevant to the company.
Thanks, Pak Lukas. And maybe follow-up question on that then. Would you say, given now we have a standards and hopefully it's a global standards, right? Soon will be a global standards. Do you think this reporting itself creates a platform for you to distinguish those companies that practice good corporate social responsibility as well as sustainable practices, and put it aside compared to the others? Do you think this is a good platform for companies to communicate that?
Yeah, I saw the what we are currently working on, which is like Jonathan mentioned earlier, it is a journey. I totally agree that this is a journey. Currently, we have so many framework. With the ISSB establishment, then TCFD already merged into already gave the mandate to ISSB, which is already a good start. And then, but we also have TNFD, then climate disclosure standard boards, and then so many framework. So I believe that just like the accounting framework in the past, Bu Rosita mentioned earlier, back in 2008, I still recall, if I can, I mean, before back then we have this principle akuntansi Indonesia, and now we already converged, and then we have adopted this IFRS standard. So I believe similar with that journey, we will also be walking into the convergence, and then through this convergence, I also believe that it is good to have an integrated reporting in the financial disclosure, in the financial statements, and of course those that I mean under the S1, only those that related to the financial related to the financials that can be included.
Okay. So you clearly see the benefits, potential benefits for you to communicate these value creation journey, right? I suppose. And maybe one question, I'll jump to the next topic on connected information, right? Connectivity. One of the key tenets of this S1 and S2, and S1 in particular, on the conceptual framework is connected information, which is the same amount of the same information, assumptions, and data should be used within the report as well as across the report, right? Sustainable reports and across the financial statements reports. I will ask this question to Jonathan. What's the object? First of all, enlighten us. What's the objective of the ISB in introducing this connected information? The benefits as well as the challenges, right? Because clearly, probably at the moment, there are still a lot of challenges for investors to look at the connectivity between these two sets of information.
The purpose of having that whole area of connectivity or connected reporting is really to address two risks and two problems. One is the overload of information and the cost of duplication in reporting, which is extreme in some cases in the market today. And we believe that if you have this requirement for connected reporting, you can reduce the duplication and therefore the cost associated with duplication in reporting, and improve the efficiency of reporting and get to reports that are more concise. So that's a help and a benefit to the business. Also, with connected reporting, even better integrated reporting, you actually reduce the silos between the different divisions within the organization. You have cross-functional working within the organization. You have one story, it's connected. If you have disconnected or disintegrated information in an annual report, which again is too common today, then there are risks hiding in the cracks in the divisions between the silos of the information. And that's a huge risk to investors, and they will impose a higher cost of capital on the company if the reporting these days is not seen to be integrated, if the board doesn't appear to be on top of the key risks facing the business, that they're not being transparent in their disclosure. And there are many examples and many academic studies showing that companies that are adopting this kind of reporting benefit from a lower cost of capital, benefit from a higher share price performance, and also attract longer term investors because they have more confidence in the governance of the company and the way the business is being managed. So that's why connected information is important. It's important for the business to reduce cost and for the investor to reduce risk. Now, there are all kinds of challenges with achieving connected or integrated reporting. One is that obviously on the accounting side, you're dealing with many decades of practice, very mature practice that is not repeatable on the sustainability side, which is an emerging practice. And we just have to be, one of my colleagues said to me the other day, we just have to get more comfortable with ambiguity. We're not used to getting comfortable with ambiguity. We are quite very much, we want certainty and we want precision. We want it to be reduced to a number now. And we've just got to get, this journey point is a really important one. It isn't just a cliche, it really is important. We've got to get used, if we're going to actually achieve success here, we've got to get used to being comfortable with being on a journey. And that means being comfortable with ambiguity, because we don't have all the answers. We don't have the 30 years of best practice. I can't say, 30 years ago, company X, because we don't have that practice. We only have the 100 years of accounting practice globally, where if you go back, and I've studied a little bit of it, all of these challenges, consolidated accounts, etc., all of these, all the reasons why it couldn't happen, you go back to the 1920s, you go back to the 1940s and the 50s, that all the same arguments were being used again. We can't disclose this information because it will tell our competitors about our strategy. All the information, that all the challenges, all the barriers that people are putting up against making progress on sustainability disclosure were used with financial accounting disclosures 100 years ago. So we have to learn from that experience, and we have to get comfortable with the change that we're going through in order to get there. So we've put that connected information package in the ISSB standards. Both boards are very committed to it. In practice, what this means is that the process of connectivity within the organization, within the IFRS Foundation, means that both boards at a staff level, at a technical level, are working very closely together. So all the ISSB board papers are prepared with input from IASB technical staff. So even though the two boards have not met formally, the staff are working together to make sure that there's consistency. There's also conceptual consistency. So the materiality definition, as I said, is the same across the two boards. We want the language to be consistent. We don't want to use, the same language but mean a different thing, and vice versa. So there has to be consistency of language. We have to borrow from the concepts of accounting if we're going to make this work. And then the final point, thinking about process, thinking about product, the final thing is about the package, the reporting package. And this is where integrated reporting and integrated thinking come in. Because the ultimate goal here is to have, to Zina's point about having a comprehensive global corporate reporting system and having the ecosystem work together to achieve that, is we want at the end of it to have one corporate reporting package of information for investors. And ultimately that will be driven by firstly having connected information, having the process of the boards working together, the language being consistent, the products being consistent, but then having a commitment to integration in reporting. And the two boards are committed to integrated reporting and have said so publicly. In the recent agenda consultation of the ISSB, one of the 4 projects that was consulted upon was integration in reporting. Should we take this idea of connectivity to the next level and start thinking about the interdependencies between the different resources and relationships? Because connectivity is one thing. It's really interesting to see the connection between that chair and that table, and they're the same color, and that's a connection. But actually, how do you integrate information? How do you change the outcome of something into the future? You can only change the outcome if you integrate the information and understand the trade-offs that are made within a business every day between the different resources and relationships that are used. So that was put into the agenda consultation. We had over 400 responses globally to that agenda consultation. There were, of course, 3 standard setting projects that were also consulted upon. The ISSB board will now consider and deliberate on the 400 responses, and over the next few months we'll decide which projects to take forward. But integration and reporting was one of those projects. We now have to wait to see what our stakeholders said and how the ISSB board responds to that.
To be clear for the benefit of our audience here, when you say the 2 boards, those are the ISSB and the IASB. And to be clear here is what you're saying is to improve connectivity, there might be some standard setting projects going forward to improve both sets of the standards.
That's absolutely right. So yes, so I should have made clear that the 2 boards are the International Accounting Standards Board and the International Sustainability Standards Board. They are 2 independent standard setting boards of the IFRS Foundation. We get our mandate from IOSCO, which is the monitoring board of the IFRS Foundation. So IOSCO endorsed the standards that are developed by the 2 boards. The IFRS Foundation has a board of trustees that set the strategy of the foundation as a whole, but the 2 standards boards, with 14 full-time board members each of each standard setting board, have 14 independent and full-time standard setting members. They meet independently every month and will determine the outcome of the consultation that I referred to earlier.
Thanks, Jonathan. So maybe I'll give a quick example of what connected information is. For example, if in the company disclosed in the sustainability reports its commitment to net zero or the risks that it faces for certain climate events, how that information that the company disclosed in the sustainability reports get incorporated and reflected in the financial statements as well. That's one example of connectivity, right? I think there's still a lot of questions, like you said, ambiguity around when companies should start recognizing liability, for example, and so on and so forth. And I'll probably change the order a bit. I'll ask Pak Lucas from the preparer's perspective. Pak Lucas, on this topic of connectivity, what would you see as the main challenges in preparing this interconnection between sustainable information and financial statements, right, from a preparer's perspective?
Number 1, of course, the readiness of our resources. Resources meaning people. In this room, I believe 99% are accountants, and I'm also accountant by education, and so we tend to stick to the number. We are trained to be literated on the financials, but now suddenly we are pulled from our comfort zone, and we have to also learn about sustainability reporting, and it is a completely different space. It is a completely different knowledge, and it is very important, especially those that sitting in the financial reporting, including the audit committee, chief financial officers now have to understand about these climate-related disclosures, and then to learn about this. Of course, it is a challenge, but I believe that we can go through this process. And then the second one is the most important. The second one, the most important thing is that we as an accountant, we already are familiar with the financial reporting process. And then this climate-related disclosure, I don't know, in the future there will be many disclosures to be issued, but with respect to the climate-related disclosures, there are a lot of information that we need to collect. And we as an accountant, we can copy and by analogy implement a similar concept with the financial reporting process, meaning that where to collect the information and how to control, what's the important control point and what's the monitoring process. That's number two. And then number three, as we agree that this is a journey, the most important thing also, I think, which Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia can facilitate is to provide a sharing session among the preparers, and then probably like share what's the challenges, and then also listen to the others, well, how they overcome the challenges. And this is not going to be an easy process, because for a company, a group of companies with a lot of subsidiaries, it's not going to be easy to collect those information. And also another challenge is for the supporting, for example, like the public accountant, how the public accountant should also be prepared to support this process in the during the audit process.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is a lot of capacity building is needed for this effort, which leads me to Ibu Rosita. Again, because Ibu Rosita's involvement in very active involvement in Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia, Ibu, ya. I will ask again your perspective on the role of Akuntan, Ikatan Akuntan Indonesia. What can we do to support this? And one thing I want to focus on is the interconnectivity between sustainability reports and financial statements, because of your unique perspective. You were once a chairperson of the Financial Accounting Standard Boards as well. So, you know, sometimes accountants or preparers are afraid, so to speak. Oh, do I disclose too much liability too early, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, you touch a very good point. So I think I envision that in the future we will need to change our paradigm on the financial reporting part. Yeah. So I think as an accountant, we need to have 1, 2, 3 steps ahead. So our paradigm now is more on the accountability going forward to relevant, right? I think in the future, I think we need to put relevant at the center of the objective of financial reporting. We want to achieve what we call it comprehensive corporate reporting. If we are talking about sustainability reporting, I think the main objective is to project what happened in the future because of this sustainability issue, right? But for the financial reporting, it's more on to portray what is our current position of the performance, right? I think it's a two different side of angle. If we want to connect this, I think the two sides need to collaborate each other, right? I think the sustainability reporting first need to identify, okay, you talk about the projected side, but you also need to help to define what happened with the existing one. So for example, like asset, right? Sometimes maybe before we acknowledge the risk of the sustainability, we even don't care about the impairment of this asset because we don't have that the information before. We don't have information that in the future, these assets need to be converted to the new technology, right? Now, because of this report, we have that information. The question is it probable? So we are going to another concept of the financial reporting, Jonathan. So because usually if it is not probable, the liability side, we cannot recognize, right? On the other side, if it is not virtually certain, we cannot recognize, right? But I think in this era, I think maybe we need to change that mindset. If, for example, the scientists can have a rigorous measurement that we can, Ibu Ningsih as an assurance provider can really rely on that, I think maybe the concept of the virtually certain Maybe still futurity is certain, but what is the meaning of futurity is certain? Because otherwise it's going to be not relevant information anymore, because we need to project what will be the impact, right? I think that is the connectivity which I dream, Jonathan. This is the message to you as ESSB. Otherwise, this report, the relevancy, yes, there is a connection, but from the value creation, it's not there anymore. It's not there. So you need to connect not only that sustainability reporting need to identify which impact to the which asset and liability, but also the concept need to be changed, both sides, right? I think that's one of the principles that I dream about. And then what will be the issue on the capacity building? We are in a very beginning journey. I think the most important is even sometimes we don't know, if we talk about the finance accounting people, yeah, Pak, yeah, they don't know what is sustainability reporting. What the hell? What will be the impact to us, right? That's the first stage that we need to do. That now is it something that you as a accountant or the accounting and finance need to take lead. I cannot imagine if at the end of the day, this sustainability reporting is being responsible to somebody who are not familiar with the internal control, the, what we call it, the skepticism, right? What will be the quality of this report? So meaning the accounting and finance department in each organization need to be built the understanding and the capability to drive this important message to the other part of the company. Because now, Jonathan, if you are talking about how they prepare the sustainability reporting, because I'm the judge of ARA, Annual Reporting Award, so I collect a lot of sustainability report. And if you see the content, it's almost similar. Even the wording. So meaning what? Who is preparing that? Consultant, right? This is the fact, right? If we continue, okay, let's say S1, S2, you implement, but the business model is still the same. You hire consultant to prepare the report. It's going to be PTA, PTB. It's a similar wording, right? So it's going to be not there. So therefore, we need to build the capability of the financial accounting first, because this person is really understand about the process of financial reporting. They need to send a message to board that for the sustainability reporting is now a different era, different process. Even my suggestion to all board, you need to put it under CFO now. To make it very faster, put it under CFO. So all the information system, data management need to be controlled by the CFO. So the connectivity between the financial reporting and sustainability will be happen. So that's the capacity building that I think the Indonesian Institute of Chartered Accountant will do to the CFO, yeah, for the board, and then also definitely for the working level to introduce what is the concept of S1, S2, and how to link this to the financial reporting. Because if you look at S1, S2, it's very principle. Yeah. If you read that and then try to understand, so how to prepare a connected information between SR and FR, you will lose in translation. I think this is the homework for the ESSB and IFSB to have a more clear guidance on how to connect these two information. But before to that direction, at least we as accountant, yeah, we understand financial reporting, right? And by reading the S1, S2, we can have a more clear example, right? By educating that, giving the more example to the participants, the finance and accounting, maybe that's something that we need to do. Number two, also about the scientist concept, Jonathan, I think this is something that ESSB can help. How we can educate the finance and accounting community to at least understand the concept of the measurement by the scientists. Number two, we can also help them to understand about the internal control, about the how to make a governance process on the sustainability reporting. So by this two-side capacity building, not only for the accountant, but also for the non-accountant, I think that's something that we need to do to achieve this connectivity.
Yeah, very good point, Bo. I agree with that. And I'm conscious of time, and I want to open questions to the floor. I'll ask one more question to Jonathan, and after this, I'll open it to the floor. So prepare your questions. So I know all of you are antsy want to ask questions. Jonathan, on a topic of capacity building, right? Coming from a European market, which is more experienced, I would say, on this topical issue on sustainability reports, can you share some of your observation on capacity building activities that they have gone through in other parts of the world that you think are good practices that we probably should copy here as well?
Absolutely. I think there are probably three that I would highlight. The first is that there is capacity building material that can be provided at a global level. So what we've produced so far are the two standards, but we've also produced, there's a draft adoption guide, which will help jurisdictions to think through the requirements from an adoption perspective. And then there's a basis of conclusions. So for people who are interested in why the board came to a particular conclusion, there is a basis of conclusions document that has been produced. We're also working on a whole set of education materials that, as I said, we'll be announcing at COP28. But what we found really is practical guidance and also illustrative examples. People want illustrative examples. So I think that is something that we're looking at in terms of providing. The TCFD also has an online portal, an online resource. So we're looking at seeing whether we can produce some kind of e-learning or online resource. The second thing is to say that not all of these capacity building resources can be or should be provided by some global organization, not least because, well, first, we don't know all the intricacies of the relationships in each jurisdiction. And secondly, we don't have, frankly, we don't have the resources to do that for every market. So number two is we've worked with or are working with partners in different jurisdictions. And I hope very much we can work with IAI here. So that when we get to the point where we've produced our capacity building materials, there can be a point at which IAI or the accounting firms within the region or both can work together on producing materials that are relevant to the jurisdiction. So going a kind of deeper level, thinking about the business culture, the regulation, so on, to map out that kind of process to give a greater granularity for the jurisdiction. Because however detailed we are, our view is going to be we're going to try and create something that is global at that level. And then the third piece is very, very practical indeed. And it comes back to this whole idea of connectivity and integration. And that is what we found. And it also comes back to Rosita's point about the CFO becoming the leader of this whole area. And that is that what we found in a very practical way is companies are operating in silos, and they are not operating on the basis of a single strategy or a single business model within their organization. And what we found is that, and it's absolutely startling how many times this happens, even in companies that think they've got a strategy and a business model that is well defined, the CFO brings together the 8 or 10 key leaders of their functional units, the head of strategy or the head of internal audit, the head of sustainability, the head of whatever it might be, head of human resources, and they bring together all the different functional units together. But on a piece of paper, they ask them to write down what the business model of the organization is on a piece of paper. And I guarantee it, 9 times out of 10, possibly even 999 times out of 1,000, you will get, if there are 8 people in the room, 8 different business models, 8 different versions of a strategy, because the organization has not been operating on the basis of one coordinated, consistent business model. And so the first thing that then happens as a result of that is, first of all, there's a huge amount of shock from the CFO or the CEO who's leading this, because they've been spending a lot of time thinking that they are operating on the basis of a single strategy. But then what happens is even more important. They actually get to the point where they then devise a single business model for the organization, with every part of the business contributing, including the trade-offs, the interdependencies between the different departments, to come up with a single business model that can be communicated throughout the organization, and then KPIs that are then driven from the board right the way through the organization, consistent, coordinated KPIs. So the organization is not just operating in an integrated way with one business model, but the KPIs are then consistently applied through the organization. So when the board of that company is talking to its investors, it can talk authoritatively and authentically about how it has created an integrated business, how the different resources and relationships are working together, what the key risks and opportunities are against each of those resources. And it can say that its biggest resource of all, that every company says is its biggest resource, which is its people, its human capital, that they are all walking to the same tune, that they are all walking in the same direction and operating as the same business model. And there is nothing more value enhancing than having one single business model and all of your employees walking to that single business model and implementing that single strategy against a single set of KPIs. And there's nothing more value enhancing than that. So that would just be 3 practical ways that I think capacity building can help companies. Some of them to come, some of them can be done now and applied in business today.
The opportunity for people in the room to ask questions. And I think there's one hand being raised here by Pak Balti. Go ahead, Pak Balti.
Thank you, Pak. I want to continue concern from Ibu Rosita regarding the relevant information. Because our company already discussed how to implement this standard. The standard explained that the objective is to make sure for the user of financial reporting understand how the entity manage the risk, regarding the climate change. Then Pak Jonathan explained regarding the scenario analysis. When we discuss in our company, there's a challenge. There's a challenging regarding the scenario analysis because the scenario, there's 2 things regarding the scenario analysis. The first is regarding its parameter, and the second is its scenario itself. Like Ibu Rosita explained the relevant information, I want to add information that comparable between entity. My concern is if the company, let's say they in the same industry, let's say the petroleum company, but if they using different parameter when they develop their scenario analysis, is it a relevant information if we cannot compare the parameter? It will be difficult for the users to choose which company is comply or which company more have a good market value. Regarding about the parameter. The second is regarding about the scenario. Because our company in energy company, which is in Indonesian, energy is something that controlled by the governments. So the scenario should come from the government. Why my concern? Because the issue not only how the company to minimize the carbon emission, but how they can have the same scenario and how the strategy maybe will be different. But at least all the users of the financial information understand this company using the same scenario. Maybe the second level or the third level will be different based on their business. That's 2 things my concern, because it will become a big question also when we try after from explanation Ibu Rosita in Bogor, we try to understand how we implement this, and we come with this question as I explained before. The second is, this is not a question, but if I see the history of EAI, I mean the standard, the first time using a rule base. After the maturity of the user of financial report, more capability building, understand and change to principle based, because all people understand now how to produce a financial report. But right now the S1 and S2 is a principle based. It means many scenario, many challenges, and we will come to see like our gurus say, if we cannot compare, how it will be relevant in decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much, indeed. And I think on the scenario analysis point, I mean, we're not being prescriptive for a reason, which is that we can't be prescriptive because it takes at least two dimensions. One, it takes us a really deep understanding of particular sectors and companies within those sectors, but also it would take us down the road of understanding what how different jurisdictions are looking to implement the standards. So we have not been prescriptive with respect to the scenario analysis, and this is really something that we've taken from the TCFD recommendations. And the purpose of the requirement to conduct a scenario analysis is really to get the board or those charged with governance to be thinking about extending the disclosure horizon. So thinking about what those future risks and opportunities are to the business model going forward. Now, there are two tensions here, or there is a tension, I should say, between producing information that is relevant and authentic to a company, to an individual company, so that you tell your unique story of value creation, and you've considered that through the eyes of your business model and through the eyes of your board, and you're telling your story. Now, we believe there is huge value in having that individuality, because that is what will set you apart from other companies in your sector if you're able to tell your unique story of value creation. At the same time, the tension is obviously with the point that you raised about having consistency of information. How do you get something that is comparable, your company comparing that with a company in the same sector, in the same market, or even in a different market? Now, this is something that to a degree we think market practice over time will help to resolve. We are going to have a situation where in individual jurisdictions, there will be guidance produced that we hope will help. The government, as you say, for state-owned enterprises may well provide guidance. Investors themselves may provide greater clarity in terms of what their expectations are. So I think from a global standard setter, and I will certainly take away the comment, it's not it's a comment that we are hearing about, particularly your second point around principles-based versus rules-based. What I would say there is, yes, it is principles-based, but there is quite a degree, there's as much precision as you can get to, I think, in a global standard that needs to be applied across, to provide a global baseline. But I completely understand that there needs to be more guidance produced. That will be from us, it will be from market participants. But I think on the scenario analysis point, there is always going to be that tension between producing something that is unique to your business, that enables you to differentiate your business model from others, to attract capital, and having that consistency of application, which I think will come over time and will come either from within the country, within the jurisdiction, or will come from investors who will set the parameters of that conversation.
I'll open one more opportunity for those of you in the room, if any of you will ask a question. Okay. All right. If not, okay, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Irwan, moderator, and thank you, the panelists, for the information. It's a very interesting time to be an accountant. Allow me to ask question to Jonathan. We understand that the S1 and S2 effective date is January 1st, 2024, which is a couple of months from now. What is the mapping actually? I wonder, what is the global mapping of, you think, or the IFRS Foundation think about, of the global readiness of this implementation? Because I cannot help but wonder that there should be many disparity of readiness, perhaps in European regions, which perhaps more used to the TCFD framework will be more ready, but perhaps in other regions, like in our region, like in our country, I don't think we are that ready. And this is a big difference of readiness. And so what is the approach of IFRS Foundation or the ISSB to address this disparity? For example, for regions or country like Indonesia, do you approach the government, not only the accountants, but also the authorities of the jurisdictions, and how and what is the framework that you are going forward to achieve the somehow quite similar implementation at the end? Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. And I think there are two ways of looking at adoption. The first is through market adoption by companies voluntarily adopting the standards, and companies that have been using sustainability disclosure standards, TCFD, SASB standards, even GRI standards, or in the integrated reporting framework, are, if you like, a step ahead because they're already thinking about sustainability issues, and maybe they've got investors who are looking, asking them to adopt the ISSB standards. So we've got a pool of companies that are ready and are already starting to adopt or thinking about adopting, getting ready to adopt the standards on a market basis, and they've been waiting for the standards to come out. But the more important point, which is the one that you are really asking about, is how are we getting the regulatory adoption? You know, how are we getting the endorsement and the adoption through regulators? And I can say that what we're doing is we are engaging intensively with regulators in different markets around the world. A number of markets have already announced that they will be adopting substantially the ISSB standards. Some markets require there to be some change to legislation to enable the adopting authority to take responsibility for sustainability disclosure matters. So there are some sometimes a legislative change that needs to be made before that can happen. But if you look in some markets like Japan, for example, very advanced work by the SSBJ, the organization that's been set up to move through the standards in Japan. In Malaysia, they've set up an interagency committee under the Securities Commission to look at how to adopt S1 and S2. So they are in their stages of thinking this through, and there'll be a consultation at some point there. In Singapore, they've just closed their consultation on adoption of S1 and S2, the Sustainability Reporting Advisory Committee there. There are some legislative changes happening in Australia. So I can go around the world and these changes are happening. In fact, even in America, where people often say what's happening in the US, the California law recently referred to the ISSB standards. The California government, the state at a state level, have actually introduced a new rule that refers to the ISSB standards to help bring in for companies that are registered in California. So what we're seeing is, and of course you've then got the ESRS, the big changes in the European Union, where we're building interoperability between those standards and the ISSB's disclosure standards. So it's happening. You know, we only got the endorsement from IOSCO at the end of July, so we're working at pace to get around the world. You know, we're building, you know, some countries like Nigeria all of a sudden just said they're going to, you know, do it, you know, very, very quickly. There are other countries across Africa that have also declared. So what we're really happy about here in Indonesia is that a sustainability standards board is being established, and we'll obviously work with local jurisdictions, on that pace to enable them to kind of work out what they want to do, consult the market, and then implement. And we're just in that process of engaging with as many jurisdictions as we can since the end of July, when IOSCO endorsed, to really move through that process of understanding which are the countries that require legislative change, which countries can set up a standard setting body immediately to bring the standards to bear, which countries are a little bit further behind and need a bit of extra support. And we're working through the jurisdictions at this stage to make sure that we can be as supportive and engaged as possible. And part of that is appointing people like me. It's not only me, to different jurisdictions around the world, so that each jurisdiction has at least a point person within the ISSB who they can talk to and engage with, which we think will accelerate the process of implementation. And one of the things that we heard very strongly from our recent agenda consultation is, yes, let's move forward with the new standards, because we're not a climate only standard setter, but please don't lose sight of working with jurisdictions to help them to adopt S1 and S2. So that is absolutely the intensive process that we're undertaking at the moment.
With that, on a hopeful note that that Jonathan has deliberated, that apparently there's a broad support for this initiative. There's still a lot of homework for everybody to do, but at least there's a broad consensus and broad support to take this forward and to make it successful, right? And I want to say thanks a lot. Please, join me in giving them a very warm round of applause. I do feel like I myself learned a lot this afternoon. It's a very enlightened session for me. And Bu Rosita and Pa Lucas also remind us that us as an accountants play a very critical role in this journey, because we are the best suited, I would say, Abu, and Pa Lucas, given the background, the rigor, the professional skepticism, and objectivities that we are trained to and espouse to do every day. We are the best suited to as a custodian to take this forward in this journey. So thank you. Thanks a lot, Jonathan, Bu Rosita, and Pa Lucas. And with this, I'll hand it over back to our Master of Ceremony.
Thank you, Pak Irwan. Let us give another big round of applause for our speaker and moderator for a fruitful session. And now we'd like to kindly ask Bapak Maliki Heru Santosa, IAI National Council member, to hand over the token appreciation for speakers and moderator of today. Please, Pak. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to inform you that participants who join us offline and online will be entitled to get an e-certificate. You are required to join our survey. Link and QR code are shown on your screen. We also would like to invite you to join IAI 66th anniversary. They will be held on 12 and 13 December 2023 in Jakarta in Balai Kartini. The theme of our anniversary is Exciting Profession, Then, Now, and After. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our end of today. Thank you all for coming. See you next time at IAI event. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat sore. Baik. Kepada para peserta yang hadir secara offline, kami persilahkan Bapak Ibu untuk berfoto bersama dengan narasumber dan moderator hari ini. Mohon bantuan dari panitia untuk mengaturkan kursi dan meja. Terima kasih.
aplikasi IAI Lounge. Melalui aplikasi ini, Anda dapat mendaftarkan diri Anda untuk mengikuti berbagai kegiatan training, membaca SAK online, dan juga memonitor kegiatan PPL yang pernah Anda ikuti. Download aplikasi IAI Lounge di App Store atau Google Play Store. Untuk anggota IAI, silakan login menggunakan email @akuntanindonesia. Sedangkan untuk non-anggota, login menggunakan alamat email yang telah Anda daftarkan sebelumnya. Pada halaman home, terdapat berbagai menu untuk dapat dinikmati. Cek section Lounge untuk melihat event IAI, SAK Online, CAW Network, dan Affiliated Campus. Untuk cek jadwal pelatihan dan event terkini, klik menu Event. Scroll untuk melihat berbagai kegiatan dan event yang dilaksanakan oleh IAI, seperti seminar, pelatihan, serta workshop. Apabila Anda telah melakukan proses pendaftaran dan telah menyelesaikan proses administrasi, silakan cek list event yang akan Anda ikuti pada menu My Event. Selanjutnya, Anda dapat membaca SAK secara online. Klik menu SAK online untuk langsung
Ini akan kami tutup dalam hitungan 3, 2, 1. Terima kasih.